Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, June 11th, 2025, our last live show for the week. And in fact, the last live show until we return next week on Thursday. Well, we should be back on the air, unless, I don't know, I'm exhausted or from travel or my state has been invaded by Donald Trump and his hand-picked troops. It's been quite a day. And it's been quite a week as I am in the background recording new material that I quickly worry will just become out of date. I mean, this is going to be useful material regardless. It just might not be the top story when these things are airing. All right, so Los Angeles continues as a situation, though it bears no resemblance to the situation Donald Trump or the White House or Stephen Miller are describing. Stephen Miller just going above and beyond in his efforts to make this thing happen. I mean, just every day he's taking to social media and speaking to the press and insisting this is a full-blown insurrection or rebellion that's going on, and that the full weight of the United States Armed Forces and maybe all the branches have to show up and conquer California and probably your state next with tanks, etc. In the meantime, Donald Trump is, flitting about doing whatever it is he wants to do, playing some golf, pretending he's making trade agreements with China, and going to UFC fights, and preparing for his big birthday party in Washington, D.C. on Saturday. Weather's not looking great for that either, by the way, but by birthday party we mean parading tanks through the streets, which may or may not be able to actually hold those tanks up. So we'll see. We'll see what happens when that goes on. But Miller insisting to anyone who'll listen that, well, it's an invasion because, as he's been saying for a long time now, it's an invasion because immigrants, and it's a foreign invasion and an attack on the United States because Mexican flags, and it therefore becomes a rebellion, and that's why we can use this, that, and the other thing. And they still haven't, though, for all their talk about the Insurrection Act, have still not actually, signed on to use the Insurrection Act. And I don't know whether they're saving that for someday special or maybe July 4th or something fun like that. But anyway, the situation in Los Angeles just becomes complicated as people are turned away from getting to their apartments because police want to stand there, or the National Guard who have been deployed there desperately look for something to do because there isn't much to do. They got lots of photo ops of them standing there in riot gear, and if the cameras, every once in a while, the cameras will turn around and take a look at what's going on, in front of them, and there's just nothing. So, all right, I don't know. We'll gather up some more news and try and set things up for our week-long break. Greg Dworkin has already been working on that, and that's good news because, I don't know. I haven't. I've been working on assembling stories for you to hear next week, and it's also very confusing as I read them or as I do live shows and say, oh, yeah, it's just like that story I said. Oh, yeah, I haven't told you that story yet. So it's a little difficult. But, all right, good morning, Greg, and let's see, where will we go with this morning's random, because I failed to select a fanfare ahead of time. My own fanfare goes like this. So
there you go.
Yeah, not a great one for me. But
try not to fall off the stage.
What was the one we liked so much for you yesterday? I think I just sort of found it at random, and it was the breaking news, spinning newspaper headline. Is that, or was this a different?
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's the one.
That's the one. Or Imperial Margarine. They both work.
All right. Okay. Excellent. Good morning. What the hell's going on around here?
So where we're going to take this? I think we should take it to Los Angeles.
All right. Hey, Los Angeles. Hi. It's early.
Over on the team chat, which is what Zoom calls the place where I put links where you could read them.
Okay. Yes.
At the very bottom of that.
Read them later, even.
I gave you a map of Los Angeles.
Yes. It's
All
very
right,
big.
and it's important. This reminds me of the Seattle stuff and Portland stuff,
Sure.
from years ago. Whenever there's an issue,
Mm.
media sets up a camera in front of the one store with a broken window,
Yeah.
ignoring the entire rest of the city. And as somebody put it, I live in LA. There is no downtown LA. It's not like other
Mm.
cities.
Okay, yeah, that's
And
kind of true.
basically, what you're talking about is 4 million people. That's more people than live in Connecticut. And you have issues at a federal courthouse. So essentially, what you're talking about is an area the size of an IKEA parking lot
Yeah,
compared to
yeah,
the whole
okay.
500 square mile, 400 million Los Angeles. And that's it.
Yeah,
This is not happening all over Los Angeles. The city isn't in flames. A building
yeah.
is being protested.
It's like if
And
there's a water
so
main
media
break.
gets it all of it wrong. They always get it wrong because it's like when they show you, and my best analogy, and you know this deep in your gut, is when they show a guy speaking on the floor of the house
Oh,
and
yeah.
they don't zoom out to show that it's a completely empty chamber.
Yeah, we see that. I keep coming back to the what I think now is an infamous the picture from Trump's first inauguration day where they were trying to make it look like there was protest all over the city, but someone took this great picture of the crowd of photographers crouching down on the ground to take a picture of a single garbage can that had been tipped over and something lit on fire in it, but they were all, setting up their shots. It was a huge crowd of them, and there was nobody else around.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, that's stagecraft for you.
Yeah. So the poster who sent in the picture of LA said, "This is
Hmm.
Los Angeles. It's 503 square miles, home to 4 million people. The small red dot is roughly where peaceful protests and nocturnal lawlessness have been happening. The rest of the city's calm. LA doesn't need to be saved. It doesn't need to be liberated.
Right, sure.
The community's in danger, but the city's not." And G. Elliott Morris had a very nice
Hmm.
recap of the whole situation. To recap, over the last 2 weeks, Federal Immigration and Customs Enforcement, that's ICE, began large-scale deportation raids in LA County and arrested dozens of people. Not hundreds, dozens. The
Yes.
conventional speculation is raids were likely the result of Stephen Miller berating Homeland Security for not
Yeah.
deporting enough people, making him look bad. In response to the expanded raids, protesters began to gather outside a federal judicial facility in LA where the migrants were being held allegedly in a cold basement with no food or water.
Yeah.
So that was the situation that led to all of this. Local armed police mostly dispersed the protesters. Later, some protesters elsewhere threw rocks, prompting the mayor of LA to say everybody has the right to peacefully protest, but violence and destruction are unacceptable. Things appear to be calming down, and then Trump ordered 2,000 National Guard soldiers into Los Angeles and greenlit an additional 700 active duty Marines to quiet what administration officials are calling an insurrection.
Hmm. Yes, right. Well, I mean, this is the only thing that it is interesting that it's like they're attempting to make the rest of the country regret having introduced the word insurrection with respect to the January 6th riot. And you'll all pay for it. I'll show you if that was an insurrection, then so is everything that you do. Well, no,
Right.
it was very
This is the
different.
first time since 1965 that a president has sent in National Guard without troops being requested. Protesters and Gavin Newsom, governor, accused the administration of using military force to inflame tensions. And Newsom went on a fiery rant on MSNBC, so nobody saw it, and dared Trump
Everyone
to
passing
arrest
around
him.
though. Yeah.
And G. Elliott Morris is a numbers guy. So he says the coverage of these events has gone as expected. If you flipped on cable news, you probably heard a familiar refrain: the tougher Trump looks, the better it is for him.
That's certainly the claim.
And others suggest protesters should not give Trump the pretext. But, as with protesters, you can't tell protesters how to protest. You should discipline them, but they're by definition undisciplined.
They're mostly not reading their phones.
I don't
or
know
your
why
messages.
Antifa isn't more disciplined.
Yeah, well, because there isn't anything. Where would you put it?
It's not.
Put it on the Antifa bulletin board?
Yeah, exactly. the numbers cut the other way, however.
Uh-huh.
And let me start before we go over this with a post that sums this up. Simon Rosenberg did. There was YouGov polling, which really is the only polling out so far. First bit of polling after Trump's escalation in L.A., and it's very bad for him. Here are the last three YouGov polls of Trump's job approval. June 2nd, -4. June 6th, -10. June 10, -13.
Well, that's
so
moving.
There's always, and he has, as Amy Walter put it, he has a floor of 45% who can't stand anything he does.
Okay.
There's always 45%, no less ever, that can't stand anything he does.
That's
high
number.
All of this political stuff is about that 10%.
Mm-hmm.
45 to 55, that range. Because he's going to have 45, maybe 40 who approve of him sometimes. Right now, it's 40% that approve. So 45 disapprove, 40 approve. The rest are up for grabs. It's a small number, but that's, the situation. So things that he does that don't play well are bad for him. And so they asked a specific question. What about a proposal to deploy National Guard to Los Angeles? Do you approve or disapprove? It's net -7, 38 approve, 45 disapprove. What about deploying Marines? 34 approve, 47 disapprove. That's -13. Now, his immigration approval is +3. You can't look at immigration, and we said this on the show a gazillion times, you can't look at Trump's numbers on immigration in terms of whether it's positive or not and say, see, that proves he can do anything. The positive immigration numbers for Trump are what he has lied about.
Okay. Yeah, that's
He's
true.
lied and said, I'm only going after criminals. That's where he's +3.
Yeah, it's almost as if people are asking.
What do you think of my immigration policy? What do you think of my performance in immigration? That's not what the question is.
Okay, right. The
question is, given the fact that I lied to you and told you that I'm only going to deport criminals, what do you think of that? He's a +3.
Yeah. So what's happening here is on the question of what do you think of what I say about enforcing immigration? We're narrowly okay with that. What do you think about what I'm doing about immigration?
I hate it. That's not what we voted for. Yeah. How many times have we
hate
that?
You? Stop it. Right. Yeah. That's pretty much illustrates it.
That's
shows
just
over
in context so you understand the polls. That's what's going on here.
Yeah. Well, it's a good point.
Now, that doesn't mean, again, I feel this in my bones, been there, done that for the Nixon era. Americans aren't going to support the protesters.
Okay. I mean,
they usually don't have even time to pay attention and see it as a distraction from their day-to-day life of trying to put food on the table.
It doesn't even rise to the level of distraction for them. Okay.
Right. So, none of this is to say, G. Elliott Morris writes, that Americans support the protesters. Another YouGov poll, 45% say they disapprove, 36% say they approved. -9 is actually less than I expected, given the images of the protests. The optics of using the military, who were originally largely peaceful, against protesters who were originally largely peaceful, they actually drag public opinion down faster than Trump's generally positive immigration brand can increase it. So he's overreached.
All right.
And this is a pattern of overestimating hardline support. Why pundits keep missing this? My take is that political commentators tend to rely on priors that are just too certain. Trump's strength on immigration broadly is advantage for Trump, therefore never question it.
Yeah.
Trump still posts a narrow net positive, and the new polling tells us that putting boots on the streets is underwater by as much as 13 points, that's the Marines, and loses the voters who Trump may bring in with unfavorable coverage of the more violent protesters. So the political upside that some commentators predict for the president simply isn't there in the data and may never show up. And you have to be more patient.
Yeah. Well, that's the base assumption, I think, of the punditry and maybe the pollsters to some extent, that using the military is generally a big plus polling wise, even though nobody likes being at war. But using the military is usually a big plus for the president. It makes him look
Well,
strong.
overseas.
Yeah.
Nobody ever,
right.
did this for in the country because, we don't do that.
Well, that's true. As a matter of fact, that reminded me in my daily posts just announcing that the show is on. I do that little gimmick thing where I use the random country spinner and just pick a country at random, look out to see whether we threaten to invade this country. And yesterday was Canada. It came up at random, which was a little worrisome, but it made me think, the United States is on this wheel. I didn't tell it to take it off and leave it out of the selection. It's just dumb luck that we haven't landed on it yet. But what do I do when it comes up and we have to worry, will Trump threaten to invade the United States today? He might, and I'm not sure what that would mean. And just like that, the pundits and the pollsters don't have that baked into their usual assumptions. Use of the military, well, usually good, but that's because you know where you use the military, because it's illegal to use the military in the other place. Oh,
Here's a statement to Fox News.
What if it's not?
From Major General Randy Manner, former acting Vice Chief, National Guard Bureau.
Okay. Randy.
He wrote to Fox News and said, this is an inappropriate use of the National Guard. It's not warranted.
Yes. So did he put the letter in a man-sized safe, or I guess he published it, and that's it? Oh, it is inappropriate.
He says, quote, the president's federal deployment of the National Guard over the official wishes of a governor is bad for all Americans concerned. The governor has the authority and ability to respond to the civil disturbance with law enforcement within his state, augmented as necessary by requesting law enforcement assistance from other governors. There's over 1 million badged and trained members of law enforcement in this country. While this is presently a legal order, it tramples the governor's rights and obligations. This is an inappropriate use of the Guard and is not warranted. We said the other day, and Gavin Newsom's already lost in court, the president has the authority to do this. That's not in question. Right. The question is, should he?
It is.
And the answer is
People
no.
People are questioning. They're losing so far. But yeah. Although it is it's supposed to lead to a much more limited number of possible uses. And I think the play here is to use the easier to establish authority, statutory authority outside of the Insurrection Act, but then try to make the military do things that would only be authorized under the Insurrection Act and say, I didn't know the difference.
Because he hasn't invoked the Insurrection Act. But at the same time, he's doing exactly what you said.
Yeah.
However, there's really nothing to do. So, it's not playing the way he wants, and he sort of looks like a jerk. And that's the subject of Greg Sargent's column today. Trump's fury at Gavin Newsom backfires and reveals his own weakness. The media had it wrong. Trump is not coming across as fearsome and strong. Instead, his watch me play fascist on TV is self-evident overkill.
Yes.
The image doesn't just reveal awful planning for this dispatching of troops. It also captures the deeper absurdity of the entire operation. The members of the military were supposedly needed to quell an urgent emergency, but as it turned out, they're not needed.
No,
guess who knows this disconnect is a problem? Donald Trump. If I didn't send in the troops to L.A. the last 3 nights, that once beautiful city would be burning down to the ground. So now he's claiming that everything is calm because I made it calm.
Right. True. And by the way, this is the second time that Trump has insisted he's got a vivid imagination for such a limited person. This is the second time that he has told America that he has, by force of arms, subdued California. The first time being, remember that time he sent the whole army to California to turn on the big beautiful water, and they did it. The military had to do it, and military had nothing to do with it. It was the Army Corps of Engineers works on the water plan. So Army Corps. Yeah. All right. Well, he keeps imagining this. And, of course, even internally the messages. It would be the once beautiful city, which is still beautiful because they saved it, would have been burned to the ground, except it wouldn't because of all the beautiful water.
Well, we sent in the U.S. Public Health Service. Look at those uniforms. And their tanks and planes brought measles under control.
Boom. Well, it's
so Greg Sargent writes,
MAGA,
like other iterations of authoritarian and fascist politics, thrives on the invocation of a vast and implacable enemy within that requires the dramatic exercise of emergency authorities, but executing the invocation in the first place requires what's technically known as making shit up.
Well, I like the technical terms for that.
Right. Thus it is that Miller and Trump spent the 2024 campaign depicting all migrants as dangerous criminals. Now, however, because there aren't enough dangerous criminals, two-bit fascist Miller is frantically urging ICE officials to head to the nearest Home Depot and scoop up as many
That's
migrants
exactly
as
what he did.
possible so that these numbers look more pleasing to the raging audience of one who's yelling at him.
Yes, and it's the smaller of the two audiences, but that's the one they've
Right.
chose to go with.
As Josh Marshall notes, by definition, this entails targeting day laborers.
Mm-hmm.
We
Oh,
have
that's the whole idea, in fact.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That going after people who want to work, in other words, and whose labor is in demand,
Yes.
meaning it inherently constitutes the opposite of hunting for dangerous criminals.
Yes.
And then that
true
also
too.
means actively shifting law enforcement away from other serious crimes,
Yeah.
from drug trafficking to child exploitation.
Yeah. Anything they should be paying attention to. All the things that you complain that they should be doing if they stop you for speeding, they now are doing. Although they're not even doing it. Now they're guarding other people doing it.
Right. Newsom's office tells me, according to National Guard officials, most of the 2,000 National Guard troops are not even being deployed right now. In fact, they're billeted in basements without food or water.
Yeah, like the
and when
migrants
challenged by
arresting.
that, the White House spokesperson says they have all the food and water they need. We simply haven't moved them to better conditions because it's too dangerous.
Yes. Oh,
the people who were sent in to stop the nonviolence can't move to get food and water because it's too dangerous, but we're the National Guard and you should be scared of us. I mean, I'm trying to follow the logic here, but it's not really working.
It's not there, obviously, but it says it's familiar non-logic. I feared for my life because I had a ballistic vest, a helmet, goggles, the most advanced weaponry, and I was moving behind an armored personnel carrier to arrest the jaywalker, but he made a move for his waistband. So
right, and so
this is
him. One of my favorite things, which is media criticism. This is Greg Sargent. Many news organizations are credulously reporting with zero independent scrutiny that the White House views this as a political winner. I just told you what the polling was. Axios says this episode provides Trump, quote, an opportunity to fuse power politics and spectacle, end quote, suggesting this lets Trump fight on his home turf. NBC News uncritically reports the White House sees this as a winning issue, but that's garbage analysis, he writes. By unthinkingly amplifying the White House spin as a good political strategy, it wraps lawless and authoritarian abuse in the aura of conventional politics. What's more, polling doesn't support the idea. Only small minorities support the sending in of the National Guard and Marines. And why even assume people will see troops descending on cities primarily as an immigration issue? MAGA politics has a built-in structural problem here. It thrives on invocations of endlessly sinister, inchoate enemies, and they don't have them.
Yeah.
So basically, they have to invade Disneyland.
Yeah.
Disney World,
well, actually, maybe they should.
And go after Mickey Mouse and other non-Americans.
While you're there, just practical advice: take the turkey.
Where was Mickey Mouse born? And let me see his birth
Show me your
certificate.
papers. Right.
He doesn't look like you or me.
Yeah, that's true.
He's not even totally white.
What kind of accent is that? That voice is crazy. I don't know. Right. Well, plenty of food and drink to be had at Disneyland. They should invade just for that.
If you're going to invade in this discussion, and again, we've talked about this, about the need for discipline, about not getting involved with violent protests. Stay away if you need to. There are protests all over the country right now. They're not violent. They're not being covered because media is media and they suck.
Yeah.
They really do. I mean, it's not difficult. If you have to set up the shot where the garbage pail has to be in a certain way that it looks, then you know what's going on. And if you know what's going on, you shouldn't be broadcasting this garbage.
Yeah. I don't know. There's a weird disconnect, I guess. Like clicks and clickbait, there's all for photographers. It's like, well, can I sell this picture? Well, not if there's no action and cool fire in it. So I guess they kind of look for that. Maybe
have to write Merriam-Webster account and tell them that this year's not new word, but most important word is context, and you really should define it and throw it around a lot more to the media.
Yeah, that would be. That's good. Well, it would be good coverage. It's just it's not. I guess sensationalism still is what drives everything. economically for these reporters. And I guess to get in the news with the other demonstrations and to show how far flung and well distributed peaceful demonstrations are, they need some sort of visual hook. And I don't know, but that comes this Saturday. Although then the question will be, will everybody be out looking for pictures of tank parades? Or, I mean, there should be coverage of the fabulously unwise timing, I think. I guess maybe Stephen Miller thinks he's got some inherent political advantage in this, but scheduling all of this opposite already previously scheduled next round of nationwide protest before any of this happened. It was scheduled months ago for June 14th.
Right.
And, you know, every news reporter and photographer in the country will be able to walk out their front door and find a protest to take dramatic pictures of, and they will.
If they so choose, if their publishers and owners allow them.
Yeah, well, you can't go to L.A.
Because after all, those guys, have mergers
destroyed
on the hopper.
Yeah,
so
right,
can't
that's
really
true.
tell what they'll be allowed to talk about.
Well, maybe more local papers should attempt to merge. Or
I suspect
something.
Terry Moran won't.
I guess
be
the opposite
it.
of that.
No, he was suspended.
Yeah, that's right. He was suspended, and I think he's now been severed from them. And I don't recall. I've seen different versions of it. Him saying, "Forget it, I'm not coming back from this suspension. Don't expect me," and others saying, "No, fired." All because he spoke out and told the truth. And yeah, I'm sure it's a little bit of both. But yeah, I don't think he's coming back to ABC. And ABC is fine with it because they think that they're going to get their merger approved this way. And, of course, my guess is probably not, unless they just give a huge chunk of the ownership to Donald Trump personally. I can't imagine him ever giving them what they want.
Well, he was fired. NPR has.
Okay, all right. I believe that. Yeah, okay. I mean, that makes some good sense, and it's easier to understand story. Probably what we expected. Let's talk about that.
Hi everybody, this is Scott Anderson, your summary guy. Are you looking forward to an egalitarian democracy free of bigotry, misogyny, racism, and greed, where people of different appearances, belief, and heritage had a right to live without fear, and everyone could expect a basic level of health, stability, and safety throughout their life? Well, too bad. The plain fact is that we're heading in the wrong direction. And where we once had a voice in such things, increasingly we don't. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. However, if you're looking to join people who understand today's issues and can intelligently address the reality of today from your point of view, you can join us at Kagro in the morning. As you know, there aren't many of us out there, at least compared to them. We need to stick together, and by that I mean send us money. That is contributions to patreon.com, secure, reoccurring contributions. Those contributions keep this show on the air and us together. We've been through a lot together. The temporary loss of the presidency, we hope. The temporary loss of the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, we hope. Face it, we are pretty much all that we have left. Remember, we couldn't do it without you, and you shouldn't do it without us. We're in this together, so thanks.
I see. All right, well, let's let everybody in on the secret. We're back on. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to us, paying attention to our. We were just checking out the Terry Moran story, and
I wanted to know about his family,
cleared up.
So I Googled, who are Terry Moran's family.
All right.
And Google gave me an AI overview.
Oh, good.
Which I found humorous. Terry Moran is the name of two distinct people. One is an American journalist known for his work at ABC News, formerly at ABC News. We're going to talk about that. The other is a father of two who passed away in 2024, according to a McComas family funeral home obituary, AI tells me. And and then tells me about the guy who passed away and what his family was. And no, I'm not interested in that. I want to, but they treat them with equal.
The AI doesn't know the difference.
I suspect there's more than one Terry Moran in the United States. There's more than just these two.
Just said. Yeah, that's true. Right. Terry Moran refers to 754,000 distinct people. It's probably.
But only two matter.
Yeah. That's
the
interesting.
one that was used to be at ABC News, and this other guy who unfortunately passed away.
And that's that's what comes of training AI on like web crawlers, I guess, right? So you'll just every instance of Terry Moran gets thrown into one pot, and this is how people end up with 6 fingers, I guess, somehow. We just put the fingers from this guy on that guy's hand, and that's helpful. AI is the worst. The worst.
So I'm sending you this example of AI.
You didn't even ask for that. You just asked for a regular search, but yeah, now they give you that answer first. And so I didn't even ask for this lake to be evaporated, but now you've done it, and you gave me a bad answer, although it was a good joke. Well, anyway, so Terry Moran, you were saying, okay, the bottom line is he now says.
The bottom line is apparently he's deceased, which is really too bad.
Yeah,
but,
but his kids are
how
both
can you say?
named
Well,
Terry,
AI told me, so it must be true.
Yeah. It's really, why don't you unplug that, Google? It's not helping anybody. Everybody just laughs at the answers they get.
It is not. Let me give you an NPR piece, a little bit more trustworthy. This is David
NPR,
Folkenflik,
two
the media
distinct
critic.
things, by the way. One is a radio station, and the other is a guy who, father of 2, who's deceased.
Yeah.
All right.
ABC drops Terry Moran after he calls Trump a world-class hater.
Miller, but yeah.
ABC News dropped veteran correspondent and anchor Terry Moran on Tuesday.
On his head. Yeah.
That would be yesterday, after he had posted on social media that Trump and a senior White House official were world-class haters. Let me give you the exact post.
They said it was both.
Yourself.
Wow.
No, he said it. The thing about Stephen Miller is not that he is the brains behind Trumpism. This is the quote from Terry Moran, 12 a.m.
That excuse is not going to fly, Greg. You're fired.
230,000 views.
All right.
On Twitter. He is one of the people who conceptualized the impulse of the Trumpist movement and translates it into policy, but that's not what's interesting about Miller. It's not brains, it's bile. Miller is a man who's richly endowed with the capacity for hatred. He is a world-class hater. So that's about Miller.
Yeah.
You could see this just by looking at him, because you could see that his hatreds are his spiritual nourishment. He eats his hate. Then he goes on to say, and this is the paragraph that got into the headline and probably got him fired, Trump is a world-class hater.
Oh.
But his hatred only a means to an end, and that end is his own glorification. That's a spiritual nourishment. Now, there's not a word that he said that's untrue.
Right.
But probably pushing the line in terms of whether they were going to fire me over this, but I'm glad he said it.
Yeah.
And it is true. And, so that's the story. Noah Berlatsky in Public Notice writes, ABC is too cowed to state the obvious about Stephen Miller.
Two distinct cows.
Because the road to fascism is paved with objectivity and civility.
Oh.
In fact, he says mainstream media has a duty to inform its audience. And if those people are hateful and those policies are hateful, you should say so. But it rarely does so. Terry Moran is to be commended for speaking truth to power. That's, quote, speaking truth to power is, after all, what journalists are supposed to do. Unfortunately, ABC News, like much of corporate media, does not want to speak truth to power, or it seems to anybody.
No, it can't.
Trump and Miller were offended by Moran's accurate description, and White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt said the administration reached out to ABC demanding action. Hopefully this journalist will either be suspended or terminated. Leavitt huffed to Maria Bartiromo. That's the story.
Yeah.
So that's what happened. So he was fired. It's not surprising, but good for Terry Moran for speaking truth to power. That's what
it wasn't
night and good luck reporters are supposed to do.
Okay, it was his duty to do so. And by the way, if you look that up on AI, you will find out that there are 2 distinct definitions of duty, and only one of them is of interest right now.
If you look up on AI, there's 2 distinct Maria Bartiromos. One is a shill that works at Fox News, and the other is actually a very interesting person.
Oh, but dead since 2020, as it turns out.
But
as everybody is.
Far more interesting than the shill.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay. And you said that Terry Moran actually has the word fired in his Twitter bio now? Is that?
No.
No.
I was making
okay. I believed that. See, fake news. You got me with that one.
Well, you asked me, I think this was in the break or on the show. I don't remember. whether or not Terry Moran was in fact fired or did he leave voluntarily. And I said, no, he's fired. I mean,
Okay.
if you look at his bio, it says he, him, fired,
Oh,
So,
I see.
but
Okay,
it doesn't.
but
That's me just making it up.
I thought that could be true because that's like, I could see the rumors are flying. He wanted to get the word out there. He puts out an official statement. No one pays attention to it. So you just park that thing in your bio and then everybody will know. That's actually a pretty effective method of communication.
Yeah, right. Bio works for ABC News. Trump is a jerk.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Then you can infer fired from that. But okay. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't make a great deal of difference. ABC looks just as bad both ways. But yeah, if they make it impossible for him to return such that he quits, I mean, it makes a difference for them in terms of HR, but everybody knows why. So, all right. ABC, quite craven and all of that. And what a bunch of whiners and snowflakes to go boo-hooing to the network. Somebody said I was a hater.
Terry Moran has almost 1 million followers on Twitter. And what his bio actually says?
Well, okay, might as well clear this up.
Independent journalist.
Okay, well, that's the answer too, right? Well, actually, that only tells us that he's separated from it. It doesn't say whether
Lucky husband, dad, Cubs, Bulls, the Bears.
Okay.
So he's from Chicago.
Oh, like the Pope, who is also coming for a big event. I think also this weekend. So there's going to be protests, birthday party, military parades, and a Pope appearance, I think. I didn't see the news on that, but I did see somebody saying, yeah, what does it mean that, or what, he's going to be drawing bigger crowds than Trump in his parade, and Trump's going to be mad, but I didn't track down the truth of it. Maybe AI said that. There's two distinct popes, one of which, a pope and an anti-pope. The one that's coming to have an event might be fake. I better look that up. Have you got any real stories while I look up the fake one and check out what's happening?
Well, there's always stories. This is a piece from Huffington Post. It goes, I mean, this is an ongoing series.
Okay.
You know how you do gun fail series and, Sanga just never stops. So
right.
This is an ongoing series of, this isn't what we voted for. This is Latinos for Trump co-founder rips Trump immigration policies as unacceptable and inhumane. This is not what we voted for, which is how she got into this category here.
Yes.
Said Florida State Senator Ileana Garcia, Republican, while accusing Trump of undermining the sense of fairness and justice.
Okay.
I've always supported Trump thick and thin. This is unacceptable and inhumane, she said in a statement. Garcia, whose district of Miami-Dade is overwhelmingly Hispanic or Latino and voted for Trump during the last election, said she sides with Trump's efforts to target immigrants who are criminals. This is exactly what we talked about. That's where he's +3. But said his targeting of those seeking lawful citizenship is unjust. That's where he's underwater. The difference between what I say and what I do.
At least
this undermines a sense of fairness and justice American people value. And she wrote this while expressing support for fellow Miami Republican Maria Elvira Salazar, who condemned Trump's actions on Friday.
All right,
Salazar was promptly attacked by Trump supporters on social media after expressing. You have to add on social media because when you say attacked by Trump supporters, it could be real. But no, we're talking about words. After expressing upset over immigrants being arrested or deported while going through the immigration courts, I remain clear in my position. Anybody with a pending asylum case deserves to go through the legal process. I still haven't seen any well-sourced, well-written stories about how the Cuban community in Miami and Florida are reacting to having their status yanked.
Yeah. I mean, that's a privileged position and has been something they've enjoyed having and lording it over everybody for decades. And revoking it, interesting move, given that it's their privilege based on their strong identification with the Republican Party. It's an odd thing to see Trump pull the rug out on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So interesting. John Favreau covers a Wall Street Journal story where he says every paragraph is more shocking than the last. And it's basically Stephen Miller targeting Home Depots and 7-Elevens.
Yes, and where's the Home Depot brass in all this? I'm waiting for them to say, hey, stop associating us with this nonsense and telling people that you
Stop
can find
associating
illegal
us with people
aliens
who work hard.
Yeah, well, there is that. But stop. Yeah, I don't like this idea that the guy running the show is going around saying if you want to know where we should be sending the military or raiding, it's Home Depot. Well, give me a break here. We worked hard for your election and gave you a lot of money. You pick on Lowe's or something. Go say the immigrants are over there.
Right.
So
the story in the Wall Street Journal is how Home Depot became ground zero in Trump's deportation push.
All right.
And basically, it's bad. Agents didn't need to develop target lists of immigrants suspected of being in the U.S. illegally, a longstanding practice, Miller said. Instead, just go to Home Depot.
Yeah. I saw a Hispanic guy there. That's really what this is. And I didn't want to, so go get him.
So the administration's immigration enforcement's a sharp break with past government practices. Federal agents make warrantless arrests. Masked agents take people into custody without identifying themselves. Plainclothes agents in at least a dozen cities have arrested migrants who show up at their court hearings. People suspected of being in the country illegally are disappearing into the federal detention system without notice to families or lawyers, according to attorneys, witnesses, and officials. In Coral Springs, Florida, at least 8 agents in tactical gear, shields, and rifles surrounded a home with guns raised to arrest a father with no criminal history. In Irvine, California, ICE agents drove a phalanx of military vehicles into the Orange County suburb to arrest a single person, and so on and so forth.
It's wasting gas, if nothing else.
What is most interesting about this is, of course, the difference between blue state governors reacting, like Gavin Newsom, who's not especially happy about what's going on. And as Matt Iglesias zeroes in on this story, which is a picture writ large kind of point of view, not so much the specifics in immigration.
Everything's writ large for him.
Blue state Republicans are the problem, he writes. And he's absolutely right.
Blue state
when it comes to housing reform in the Northeast, for example, right NIMBYs are quiet online but loud in state legislatures. So what he's trying to say is that every good reform that you would like to see happen that doesn't happen in a blue state, whether it's New York or California, generally doesn't happen not because Democrats are feckless, but rather Republicans are present in large enough numbers to block anything good from happening. And it's the Republican Party that blocks it, whereas the very same policies in red states with Republican governors does not get blocked. So if you have a decent housing policy, for example, it'll get implemented in Texas, but blocked in New York.
I see.
And he says the attitudes of blue state Republicans is, in my view, Matt Iglesias' view, the underrated dark matter of American housing politics, for example. But I would say it goes beyond housing. It goes to everything.
Yes, please. I mean,
the fact that Republicans don't speak up about bad policies and don't support good policies because somehow or other they are either told not to or they see it as good politics for them to block things and make people miserable so that they could say, you see, vote for our party instead, is a major problem in American politics that doesn't get talked about enough. Iglesias is talking about it in terms of one of his favorite things, abundance, NIMBY.
I don't understand
housing,
any of that.
but fine. You can jump down that rabbit hole if you want to.
I have not.
But it's true writ large.
That's the first time anybody has explained to me. What is he ranting about? I don't even understand it. I keep thinking about it. Should I read what did they mean every time somebody even derisively laughs at the word abundance? And I just haven't. It's not at my kitchen table. I pay attention to a lot of things, and I'm like, I don't care about
abundance.
What he's saying.
You should build things. Instead of spending your time blocking things and being negative, you should build things and be positive. That's basically what abundance says. In order to do that, it may mean trimming regulations. But in fact, in real life, it also means defeating Republicans. You can get this stuff passed.
I like that, certainly. I now get, hey, there's a good point in here, and you can see how you get tangled up in it. And Iglesias lives to get tangled up in things, so I'm sure he's fine. But yeah, all right, at the bottom, all right, I see what you mean. This is a good explanation for why you find good policy not getting passed in states nominally controlled by Democrats.
Right. And the whole abundance movement is a movement to try to fix that.
Okay.
But they may be focusing on not the wrong thing, but one of the only things that somehow or other has to do with Democrats, when in fact you should be focusing on Republicans.
Okay, I can buy that too. All right.
These are the people that only protest Democratic, candidacies, but never show up at Republican
I can see how that would cross with what you've said
about the same issue, because only Democrats have, agency here.
Yeah, it does. Okay, I think together the points make they're good points independently, and they work well together. I don't know if I buy into there being an agenda that fixes the whole thing necessarily, but
there never is.
It
but
is a great
you can make
point.
Progress. Progress is incremental.
Yeah, and it takes time. Parse this down to the human factor of it. Why is it that this is happening? It's not. Yeah, you certainly shouldn't be coming away from it with the conclusion, well, the reason it happens is, as much as I hate Republicans, Democrats are worse, even though the policies that they say they support are the same ones that I say I support. But okay, understand the dynamics of how this happens. Then there's a nihilistic wacko party, and it should go without saying, but you should say it anyway.
Never going to vote for Democrats. Yeah. So, that's why you don't get a seat at the table. So shut up and go home.
Oh, yes, I think. All right. Well, now I get some sense of it. I don't think I'm going to do any more abundance reading, but I can see people.
Yeah, but let me give you some specifics now about housing to put this in perspective.
Housing. This is their thing.
Republicans have led several major pushes for housing reform in red states. Well, housing costs are one of the reasons why Democrats are in trouble. And again, the 50,000 view, the big picture view is that the public sees Democrats more or less as supporting the status quo, and the status quo sucks and they hate it. And it's one of the reasons why they don't have an intrinsic, given everything else, all things being equal, I'll vote Democrat. You won't vote Democrat because you don't like the status quo. Why don't you like the status quo? Because costs are too high, including housing.
Yeah. Why is that? Republicans won't allow any fixes unless their names are on it.
And if you don't make that clear, people won't get it. Republicans have led several major pushes for housing reform in red states. These efforts inevitably GOP-led because these states have GOP-controlled legislatures. Mm-hmm. To the best of my knowledge, Iglesias' knowledge, none of them has been met with uniform GOP opposition, but in New York or Maryland, we've seen divided Democrats unable to push through housing reform supported by Democratic governors in the face of relentless GOP hostility. You may hear blue state problem and think problem with Democrat, but outside of Hawaii, what the Republicans in blue states do actually matters. Or maybe Rhode Island. There's only 5 Republicans in the New York City Council, but they all voted no in the City of Yes zoning initiative last December. What's more, a lot of the no voting Democrats on the council were from Staten Island.
No, yeah. Okay.
Who could plausibly lose an election to a Republican. So left NIMBYism has a extremely vocal presence on the internet where people care a lot about relative status and agenda control. And right NIMBYism is a powerful force, both in blue state suburbs and in quasi-suburban peripheral neighborhoods like New York. And this school of thought doesn't have much of a voice on the internet, though, because it's a politics of cranky old people who aren't especially online.
Yeah, well, it's housing policy, and that's beyond, oh, no, it costs a lot. That's the extent of people's interest in housing policy.
Right.
Normal people.
When New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy suggested some kind of statewide zoning reform, Tony Bucco, the GOP leader, said, I think the devil will be in the details. If they're going to impose zoning requirements, then no. In other words, he talked as if Murphy were proposing some stringent economic regulation, but what's being imposed is a reduction in regulation.
Right.
And he's using that as an excuse to say, I'm not going to let you pass anything because it'll look good for you and bad for my party.
Yeah. And that's something that people should be familiar with by now. And
yes. So that's really the point he's trying to make. And yes, he gets too much into the weeds to do it, but it's a valid point.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad there's something. I figured there was something in there somewhere. I didn't really care to parse it out, and I was baffled at the number of mentions of abundance, and I'm like, I got nothing in passing. All I can glean from this thing is it has something to do with housing policy, and I don't know why. And then everybody's angry at them because they're pundits. And so, okay. And I honestly, nothing else broke through to me. So, by the way, they have a huge messaging problem. I mean, I'm paying attention to this stuff every day. And in passing, I can't avoid Ezra Klein, Matt Iglesias. They're not on my radar, but everyone else I know.
Or D.K. Thompson.
Yeah. But still, I'm like, after now like 3 months, I'm like, I think it has to do with housing policy, and I don't know why.
Housing and regulation.
Huh. All right.
Right. Why can you build a house in Texas, but you can't build a house in California? And the answer is because Republicans in California block it from being done. That's why.
Okay. That does make some sense. I don't know if I'm happy I know it.
But they don't block it in Texas because they'll get yelled at.
Yeah. And of course, they approach it a different way. Like we're blocking it in California just because we don't want there to be an accomplishment for Democrats. In Texas, We're getting out of the way because our version of housing reform is you can build it out of paper and sell it for $1 billion if you want.
We need our governor to be able to say, look what I'm doing for you people.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You, the little people.
All right.
Let's talk politics for just a few minutes. Couple of elections. It's Wednesday. There's always something going on a Tuesday
Electoral politics. Yeah, all right.
New Jersey had a Democratic primary and a Republican primary.
Okay.
I forget his name. Citarelli, the guy we expected to win the Republican primary, did win.
Barbarino.
Mikey Sherrill wins the Democratic primary for New Jersey governor.
Yeah.
Beat all those governors, beat all those mayors, rather, I should say.
Okay.
Some of the ones who were arrested, some of the ones who weren't arrested. Didn't matter. Mikey Sherrill gets 33.8. Steve Fulop gets 15. Ras Baraka, he's one of the ones who was arrested, gets 13. Sean Spiller ties Baraka. Stephen Sweeney gets just a hair under that.
Too much alliteration.
Mikey Sherrill is a normie. A normie won the Democratic primary.
Okay.
And may well go on to win the election. In Virginia, who do you have? Abigail Spanberger and Winsome Sears?
Yes. Abigail Hamburger.
There's going to be a female governor of Virginia, whoever wins.
Yes.
Which is probably Spanberger.
Yes, I hope so. Goodness.
And if Mikey Sherrill wins her race in New Jersey against Jack Citarelli, then we'll have more female governors than at any time in American history.
Oh, all right. The League of Female Governors will
meanwhile
be raised
Oklahoma, HD 71, a Harris plus 19 district.
Okay.
Amanda Clinton, Democrat, 84.7 yesterday. Beverly Atterbury, Republican, 15.3. That is a 50-point overperformance. The biggest overperformance this year from a Democrat, not counting the heavily Jewish district in Brooklyn, which has its own rules.
Yeah, all right.
Political rules. It has nothing to do with making a statement for anywhere else in the country, but this does.
Yeah. Okay. Well, 50% overperformance.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
People are not happy with Trump, and you have to look for. Because, what do polls mean? I'm sick and tired of this poll, that. Well, what about elections? Yeah, elections count. We got to see. Wait a minute. There aren't any elections. How are we going to know?
Yes,
well, that's what these, little elections are for.
Right. Local specials. They're called special elections. Pay special attention.
Yes, exactly right. There's a special message here, and, you should really
there was also an election in D.C. It wasn't. I don't think it was yesterday, but the day before. They were having an election for president of the D.C. Bar Association, and that has some import as well. I warned about this a while back because, as it turns out, it was an election in which one of the candidates, Bradley J. Bondi, it's Pam Bondi's brother, was running for president of the D.C. Bar Association. The implication there all being that he could say, "Oh, you want to disbar Trump administration liars? No, you don't." Well, he did real well. He was defeated 90.9% to 9.1% in a record turnout, record voting election for the DC Bar Association. So he did. If he was going to try to crack double digits, he didn't make that bar. But if he was trying to clear the 9% bar, he did in fact get 9.1%. So congratulations there, Diane A. Seltzer, netting 90.9% of the vote. Not 99%, 90.9.
Yeah,
So,
and people were lobbying to vote against him.
Yes.
George Conway and other very prominent lawyers saying, whatever you do, please don't vote for this guy.
Yeah, and reminding people that you should vote. It's something that not every attorney, bothers with necessarily. You should never leave a ballot lying around, but...
So a little more about HD 71 from an online source that I've never seen before and therefore haven't vetted.
I trust
HD 71 special election, Beverly Atterbury, Amanda Clinton tout professional experiences, a Democratic public relations specialist, and a Republican attorney are competing in a June 10 special election, and the Democrat cleaned up. But this is in Tulsa.
All right.
Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Right.
Okay.
Well, there's no
Amanda Clinton, a Cherokee Nation citizen, became the Democratic nominee. Beverly Atterbury emerged the winner from a Republican runoff last month. It was once a Republican stronghold, but no more.
Is that right?
So Atterbury, who is the Republican, asked her pitch to voters going into the general election. Atterbury said her legal experience is important. We need more attorneys in the legislature. Only about 5% of our total legislature is lawyers.
Is that right? Wow, that's
very... They shouldn't be 100%, but we need a few more.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, that's boring. How can anybody think that? No, I guess it's true in Oklahoma. That's all right. Well,
asked to respond to Atterbury's claim she doesn't know how to read laws. Clinton, the Democrat, said, well, I'm very familiar with tribal law.
Oh, well, all right. That's a basis.
Asked about her pitch, Clinton stressed her professional political experience, citing her time working with Cherokee Nation.
Okay.
And she cleaned up.
Great. Wow. And I mean, how so it was already what you said, plus 19 for Harris, and then you got 50 points more than that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So that's pretty amazing.
I think now people will say she should run for president.
Right. So naturally the response online, well, none of it counts. Yeah, well, it all counts. Yes, but only a low percentage voted. Well, hello.
Look, she's getting
special
power.
Election. That's what happens.
She gets a voting card now.
And you have winners and you have losers. And your side lost.
Yes.
So suck it up.
And in historic fashion. And that's what you get for nominating somebody whose name is Abadabadooby, whatever that was some name. And not even a terribly complicated one. But and for the first time, wow, and now a Republican saying, we need more lawyers in the legislature. And I laughed, and Oklahoma doesn't have any. Oh, that makes some sense. I believe
you should have at least 2.
All right, Greg, we're taking a big break, but we'll stay in contact. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's go forward with the last hour of live programming that you will hear, although it'll sound as live as anything to you for the next week. But okay, you get the idea. All right, I have been handed a bulletin by production staff recommending, maybe for the first time, a New York Times piece about, politics and everything. And has been handed to me a note and the piece forwarded to me via text. And though before I read it, I'll clear this up. Pope Leo's event that will be opposite the major military parade in Washington, D.C. is not a live event for the Pope. I mean, he'll be alive during it. Don't get me wrong. We just went through this. Let's not do it again. But he is making a virtual appearance. I was confused about it a little bit as I was trying to search it while I was talking to Greg, and I was like, there's nothing in the news about him coming to the United States. He's going to Turkey, he's going to this place and that place, but it doesn't say anything about him coming to the U.S. And then I stumbled upon, finally, the word from Newsweek. Pope Leo sells out U.S. event clashing with parade on Trump's birthday. So it is happening, and the explanation for it is that Pope Leo, the 14th, by the way, has helped sell out a stadium show in Chicago, where he's from, with a promised virtual appearance What show is this? I don't know. Scheduled for the same day as a major military parade. Major, that's where that came from, in Washington, D.C. And I mean, it's interesting, and it'll make for a great thing if, in fact, more people go to the virtual event featuring the Pope than go to the real event featuring the president. And he'll be all angry about it, and he'll deny that it happened, and I don't know, invade Vatican City. But I don't know what the event is, and I don't know that it really clashes per se. Like if you're in Chicago on Saturday, are you going to the parade in Washington D.C.? No, because it's in Washington D.C. and you're not. You're in Chicago. Are you going to watch the parade on TV? Probably not, because it's a stupid thing, and it's not. There's no like, oh well, it's the annual tradition. Watching the Thanksgiving Day parade on TV in Chicago, even though it's happening in New York, sure, it's an annual tradition. Watching Donald Trump's birthday party in Washington, D.C. while you're in Chicago? No, probably not. Now, it's also not a tradition to have the Pope appear on TV in Chicago either, but at least there's the Chicago hook, right? And this is something new and whatever. Anyway, I don't see the comparison. However, here it is. Within the first 15 minutes of ticket availability, more than 9,000 people requested seats for the Chicago gathering, and that's not even a whole lot. But by the end of the first day, that number had climbed to 20,000. As of Friday, the $5 tickets, that's a pretty good price, were completely sold out. I don't know how many there are, but it is a stadium. The event will be streamed live online, although Catholic TV has not confirmed whether it will air the broadcast. What are you doing, Catholic TV? What do you have that's more important? I wonder. Why it matters. I hate when they have to. If you have to say why it matters, you haven't written a good headline. Pope Leo's expected involvement in the Chicago event. What is it? I don't know. Which will be streamed online, which you already said. You could have told me what the event was with those words. Will draw huge interest and will divide some attention away. Divide? All right. From the Trump-backed military parade the same day, the president's birthday. And I'm wondering, are there network television plans for covering this thing? Or is that what's happening? The Pope, in his first address to world diplomats, said the dignity of migrants has to be respected, potentially putting himself on a collision course with the Trump administration, which has stepped up and, all right, you don't need that background, but what's the event? What to know? The pontiff is set to appear on big screens at Rate Field. Everyone know Rate Field? Rate Field is the name of the home of Major League Baseball's Chicago White Sox. Now, is that, I don't follow the White Sox necessarily, but necessarily at all. But is that a new stadium or a renamed stadium? Like, didn't the White Sox play in all I remember growing up was that they played where? I don't know. What was the name? I'll look it up. Chicago White Sox, Rate Field. I should be looking at the Wikipedia on it to see whether it is a renamed, to look at the history of it. All right, here's the Wikipedia entry. Chicagoans, I guess, know this offhand. Yeah. So is it a new stadium or is it renamed? Is my question. Because where were they? Comiskey Park. Yeah. Oh, okay. So here's the deal. Rate Field is formerly named Comiskey Park. Also has been previously named U.S. Cellular Field and Guaranteed Rate Field. Now it's just Rate Field. Stadium naming has been kind of a disaster, but what can I tell you? Brings in money. Right. So it was, I guess it's a new-ish park, right? Completed at a cost of $137 million. The park opened as Comiskey Park on April 18th, 1991, that's a million years ago these days, taking its name from the original Comiskey Park, which was the team's home since 1910. All right, got it. Just I don't know, stream of consciousness. I wanted to make sure we knew what we were doing. So, okay, they're having an event. Now it no longer matters, and they're clearly not going to tell me what kind of event this is, but at least we know where it is, and supposedly it's opposite this other nonsense going on in New York, in Washington. All right. By the way, it says notably, remember, the excuse for all this is, well, it's the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States Army, so it's not a Donald Trump birthday party per se. Although they do say it right here in this article. Notably, the Army did not hold a parade for its bicentennial in 1975, so this is kind of a new thing too. All right. I still don't know what the event is going on in the baseball park, but suffice to say, it's a Catholic one, and the most important Catholic in the world, although he wouldn't describe himself that way, is going to make an appearance, and it will be interesting to see. Is 20,000 tickets sold out pretty quick? It sounds to me like, wouldn't Rate Field seat more than that? Probably yes, although not every seat will necessarily be sold because it's hard to see flat screens from every seat. But anyway, I don't know how many people are going to come to watch the parade, and I don't even know if there's a place to watch the parade. Although I do understand that the Trump White House, with this event, the parade, as with his event yesterday, which we haven't even discussed yet, where he went to a military installation to give a very, very political speech, and to have the troops in uniform there behind him cheering him for his political speech, much of which was about, yeah, we're going to conquer Los Angeles with you guys. And they came and cheered for him, and it's a huge violation of normal military codes of conduct, etc. But both that and the parade are being engineered for visual success. I saw circulated yesterday, and I'll have to make a note to look around to see whether I can find it again, but circulated on social media was a memo from the White House to the military authorities at the base at which Trump was speaking, and I got some, maybe we'll be able to shoehorn those reports in, but specifically saying, I want to get the right kind of troops behind me for my visual. First of all, they should be Trump supporters. And there was a mechanism set up whereby troops, basically they were being ordered to sit behind the president and be supportive, which is wrong top to bottom. But they did allow for soldiers who were not interested in doing that to ask to opt out and not be assigned the job of sitting behind the president. And they knew what they were after. The memo was like, I don't want any troops who are going to be sitting behind me rolling their eyes and shaking their head in disagreement with the president. Though most of those guys would probably have the good sense to just sit on their hands and do nothing versus being demonstrative. Anyway, they had done that. And also, by the way, just so you know where the Trump head still is, I don't want any fat guys. They should look fit, not fat. Well, they're in the Army, generally speaking, as enlisted troops. They're going to be in relatively good shape. They do a lot of physical training, but I don't want any fatties behind me, which is odd because it would help him look better. But anyway, that and same thing out at the parade. They asked apparently they approached the Vietnam veterans organizations and asked for, we need you to provide us with, give me 25 of your number to represent the group in the reviewing stand at the parade, and they said no, we're not interested in doing that. So that seemed pretty interesting as well, and just interesting that they're stage managing the whole thing. But what else are they going to do? It's a fictional event. Okay, now I was going to tell you a different story. Right, the very interesting opinion piece from the New York Times, which was handed to me by production staff. The beautiful danger of normal life during an autocratic rise. Very intriguing and poetic. David Leonhardt is at the heart of this one. David Leonhardt sits down with M. Gessen, okay, just the initial M, to unpack this new phase of the Trump era. Probably wouldn't stop me normally for a read, but the fact that this was picked up on by staff here at World Headquarters is what's most interesting. In this episode of The Opinions, I guess there's maybe a podcast, and this is perhaps a transcript or highlights of it. In the episode of The Opinions, The editorial director, David Leonhardt, and the opinion columnist, M. Gessen, keep him guessing as what M stands for. You can remember it that way. Discuss the very human inclination to try to return to normal life in the midst of a serious crisis. Let's have as quick a look as possible here. But it looks like it might be rather lengthy. But the transcript has been lightly edited for length and clarity, so that's good news. And of course, the recording is here, but I can't just steal that. So here we go. David Leonhardt begins by saying, I am David Leonhardt, the director of the New York Times editorial board. Every week I'm having conversations to help shape the board's opinions, and today I'm talking with my colleague and the columnist Masha Gessen. Interesting. Just going with M up above. Masha is one of the country's sharpest thinkers on the threats that President Trump poses and on the best ways to resist them. Masha recently wrote a book about shock exhaustion. I think we all got that. A feeling they know well from Vladimir Putin's rule in Russia. Under Putin, so many awful things happened in such close succession that the shock eventually faded and the crimes that Putin committed became routine. Aha. Masha is worried that we're entering a similar phase in the United States, so today we're going to talk through this together. The shock of Trump's first months in office, the defiance that does exist, and how all of us can refrain from becoming numb. Masha, welcome. Masha Gessen says, thanks. Great to be here. So I want to start with this feeling of shock exhaustion that you described so well. Can you give us some sense of what that looked like from your time in Putin's Russia? And for listeners who aren't familiar with your whole history, when was it that you were in Putin's Russia? Masha says, well, in case you hadn't guessed from Masha, so I am Russian. I went back to Russia from the United States as a correspondent in 1991 and stayed for 22 years until I was forced to leave by the Kremlin. And then I continued going back and forth and reporting until a couple of weeks after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine commenced, the full-scale one being the one that happened in 22, not counting everything that happened since 2014, right? So I reported on Russia for more than 30 years and on Putin's autocratic rise, autocratic breakthrough, and autocratic consolidation for the duration. And it's interesting. You call it shock exhaustion. Well, you do, actually, but okay. It's not a term I would use, actually. Wait a minute. Did they not just say, was that not the name of the book? Oh, we're going, the shock of, where did he first mention? I thought he said that was the name of his book. Did I misunderstand that, or did I? Okay. Fine. Where is that? Okay. Recently wrote a book about shock exhaustion. I thought it was called shock exhaustion. Well, that explains that. He says, no, I wouldn't use that term. Why is that? Actually, because I don't know if it's about exhaustion, he says. I think it's very human and in a way very beautiful, this desire to normalize, to habituate, and to find our footing in any situation and to keep on living. It's sort of a great life-affirming ability that we have, except it has a way of normalizing things that we really shouldn't live with. I think I first became aware of how it works when I was a war correspondent. And, you go into a country, if you get there at the beginning of a conflict, for the first few days, people are just shocked. They're literally and figuratively shell-shocked. Their entire way of life has vanished, and they can't believe it's happening. And then 2-3 days in, people are cooking on the sidewalk or having classes in bomb shelters, and it's routine, and it's as though it's always been like this, and it's this incredible human ability, but it's also in itself shocking to me. This is interesting. I'm going to pause for a second just here to say, well, I really gravitate in searching, if I'm searching for something to watch on Netflix. For some reason, I'm really drawn to movies, historically based movies, if not necessarily documentaries, but dramatized fiction. But I am really interested in the stories surrounding, bookending wars. The first days when everybody realizes, oh my God, we're at war, everything's going to change, and how those things change. And the last days, oh my God, this might be the end of the war. How do we logistically handle that? It's I don't know. Somehow it's really fascinating to me. One, the realization that, oh my God, things are going to change, or especially that weird period where, well, technically we're at war. The war's been declared. I know it's coming. I have no reason to believe that they're kidding me about that, but I don't see anything yet. How do we prepare for that? And do we Do we prepare for that? And then just sort of, what does it look like to see the first, in the case of World War II, German troops arriving over the hill here? Like, what do we do? Do we shoot? What are we doing? I don't even know how to handle this. And then, of course, the stuff at the end of the war, also very interesting. Some of the more interesting things I've seen was, I think I've mentioned it before, that I guess some German soldiers saying basically, if you thought the war was brutal, wait till you see the peace. Like when you're the losing side and you're withdrawing from areas you had been occupying and you're on your way out and the other folks realize this is our chance to get you back for all the oppression we felt during your occupation. Yeah, some wild stuff happened at the end of the war. All right, but back to Masha here. And to finally answer your question, how did it happen with Putin? With Putin, it happened for me over and over again. So in 2000, 2001, when he went after the independent media, it started as sort of an all-out attack, and it was shocking that it was out in the open, that frank and that brutal. And then we just got used to the fact that there was little, less, and then no independent media in Russia. And then in 2004, Russian troops shelled a school where children had been taken hostage. And then Putin used that terrorist attack as pretext for canceling gubernatorial elections in perpetuity, and that was shocking. And then we got used to that. I can keep going. Through the invasion of Georgia and the annexation of Crimea, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Every time you have this moment of like, I can't go on, and then you can. And Leonhardt responds, yeah, and before we get into some of the bigger political things, I have to ask you a personal question. I mean, you were there during a period when Putin was killing critics, and you were writing incredibly critical and clear-eyed journalism. Did you fear for your own safety? Did you take precautions? Well, I think your question actually goes to the root of this whole normalization phenomenon. We all tell ourselves stories in order to live, and I write about this in my piece on Christo Grozev, the investigative journalist who has been targeted by the Kremlin for years now and had an entire assassination squad following him around Europe. I think every time we see somebody has been poisoned or shot, apparently for their criticism of the Kremlin, and this is a fairly large camp of independent journalists, we always tell ourselves some story about why that can't happen to us. And I know it's a thin story, but that's how you cope. And Leonhardt responding there, obviously, in addition to similarities, are a whole lot of differences between the situation in Putin's Russia and the situation in the United States today. I just want to pull out one, which is the time frame. You describe something in Russia that happens over years. Here in the United States, we've just been through this incredible blizzard of the past 4+ months of President Trump taking a fundamentally different, to use a neutral word, approach to power. I believe he's violating the rule of law. I know you believe he's violating the rule of law. How do you think it matters to this larger subject of exhaustion and numbing out that so much of what we're dealing with in the United States has happened in the span of weeks or months as opposed to years? Gessen's answer, it really scares me. It really scares me in the face of it because it's just an incredible amount of destruction in a very short amount of time. And democratic institutions are not designed to respond to things quickly. So it's a very effective way of attacking democratic institutions. But it also scares me from the psychological point of view because I think that he has made a whole bunch of things thinkable in a very short amount of time. Summary deportations existed before, but these particular deportations that are just spectacularly and intentionally brutal, with people being stuffed into unmarked vans. The attack on the judiciary, the attack on universities, the attack on the media, all the stuff that's stuffed into this big, beautiful bill, right? The decimation of the federal government. And here, okay, one more comment from me on this one. It is very interesting. It opens up a world of possibilities. Ones you're not supposed to talk about, right? But this idea that all this stuff that's happened so quickly and made a whole bunch of things thinkable in a very short amount of time. Some of the things that are thinkable are reactions to the things that the Trump administration is imposing on the rest of us, defenses to and reactions to those things, which normally are in the category of unthinkable. And I'm sure they were in the category of unthinkable, for instance, in Ceausescu's Romania, too. But then suddenly the opportunity presents itself and people say, this was previously unthinkable, but so is everything. Broad gesture at everything. And so, what can I tell you? We're going to take this opportunity to do something else that's unthinkable or that was previously unthinkable and then normalize it and get back to work. That option, it's against the rules, it's against the law, but it's there. Any of those things, he continues in his answer, not mine, any one of those things is enough to spend a week sort of walking around in a haze, trying to wrap your mind around it, all the things that he had just listed that were spectacular and intentionally brutal, right? And we've wrapped our minds around all of them. None of that is unthinkable anymore because it's actually happening, and so I'm afraid it will be like the effect of habitation to war, where there comes a point very quickly where it's only military analysts who look at how the front line is shifting this way or that way over the course of days or weeks, as opposed to what's actually happening to people, right? Trump has opened all the fronts. I really fear that most people will look at it and, first of all, respond to their subjective feeling that their own lives haven't changed that much, or if they have changed, they can still live with it and then stop paying attention. Leonhardt then, responding, as you mentioned, there is something deeply human and beautiful about people's ability to cope. I've read a lot of social science research, and one of the things that's quite striking is often people who have a traumatic accident in their life, the kind of thing that might cause them to be paralyzed. For instance, there is a very big short-term hit to their self-description of life satisfaction, and then it actually returns to roughly where it was. People are incredibly good at coping in ways that are truly wonderful. But as you pointed out, in this case, there's a really dark political lining to it. And I'm curious, from your experience in Russia, what advice do you have for those of us living through this in the United States right now? How do we, on the one hand, avoid just becoming depressed and obsessed by politics at all moments? And on the other hand, how do we essentially avoid becoming complicit in a diminution of American democracy? Well, that's a great comparison to people who survive some sort of catastrophic health event. I think that the most useful thing that we can take from Russia is that my experience, the experience of my friends, most of whom were journalists over the years, invariably, we would look back every few years to where we had been a year ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago, and think, wow, there was so much possibility for action. There was still so much we could do. I wonder, is that the feeling people get when I play old episodes, reruns from 1 year, 2 year, 5 years prior? Sometimes people do comment, now it feels like it was so different. I hardly even remember the way it was back then. I mean, at this point, Masha continues, Russian independent journalists are looking at where they were 4 years ago and thinking wistfully, wow, when I could still have access to actual living people in the actual country that I'm covering, that was an amazing possibility for doing journalism. Now that I live in exile and can't go back, I think we can actually build on this life-affirming impulse to say we need to take advantage of all the space that is available at any given point. We know what we're dealing with. We're dealing with an anti-democratic force that aims to continuously reduce the space available for action, whether it's action by journalists or action by lawyers or action by academics. For any group of us to act in our particular fields, that space is shrinking, and so when we find our footing after a shock, we need to take stock of the space that's available and take advantage of all of it, which is a good reminder for everybody to go and find their local nearby protest on Saturday for the what's being called the No Kings rallies around this time around. And it's the same organizations that put together the first 1, 2, 3 rounds of initial protests, both against the Trump administration and the Tesla takedown and all of those things. It just so happens that this thing was scheduled. They picked it very wisely, probably guessing that Trump was going to do something foolish on the 14th because he was hinting at it pretty early on. So anyway, but the LA thing, a happy coincidence, if you can call it that. But I guess the point here is take advantage of the space. If you weren't thinking of making yourself available to one of these protests, perhaps now you should. Just provide a body, be there, and show that there are large numbers everywhere. Okay, Leonhardt, then following up from what you've seen in Russia, but also elsewhere, what are the most effective ways, or what are more effective ways to confront the creeping threat of authoritarianism? What should people do that makes clear that they understand this isn't business as usual? Guesson's answer, we don't have a lot of successful examples to look at, and that's very disheartening. It also is a call to invention. We do have a lot of unsuccessful examples to look at, so we can at least ask the Democratic Party not to repeat the mistakes of their colleagues in any number of European and Latin American countries, where parties that are in opposition to a party staging an autocratic attempt, which tend to be kind of a right-wing populist autocratic party, to try to outflank them on the right, particularly on issues like immigration. In the United States, it's immigration and trans issues. This idea of moving forward an imaginary center to reclaim something, and we know that doesn't work. The only thing that can possibly work is a visionary, loud, appealing alternative rather than a milder form of the same thing that the very charismatic, aspiring autocrat is offering. And we've heard that since pre-Trump days, right? That the answer to whatever you think your problem is electorally can't be offering people Republican light, right? We're just a little less crazy than the Republicans. We're a little more normie than that. We want the same things. We just want to do it in a normie fashion because 9 times out of 10, given the choice between the real thing, as terrible as it is, and the fake version of a real but terrible thing, people just say, I'll just take the real one, I guess. All right, we'll continue scanning this and see if we want to complete this discussion and see what else we can shoehorn in our last moments to fill the space. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back, everybody. Had a little trouble fighting with my fumbling with the mute button, but we're back. And let's see. Let's continue on with the discussion between David Leonhardt and Masha Gessen. I was looking over the break, and I did come up with the information about or the post about the Vietnam veterans being asked to provide people for the reviewing stand of the parade, but I haven't found the memo about Trump's appearance at the military base, but perhaps we'll get to that in reading the news roundups of what happened there, because we do want to get that on the record. We left off, though, with this discussion just after basically Masha Gessen saying what you don't want here is providing Republican light and thinking that you can do that and occupy that magic spot somehow and actually convince people to cross over and trust you with executing the Republican vision better than Republicans do. Doesn't work. Leonhardt says, this is good because you and I agree on so much. And I think this gets to one place where we may not entirely agree and may actually disagree. So I'm really torn about that question, which in many ways is a question about, should you compromise with an enemy or should you even see it as a compromise. I absolutely take the point that if you start to give in to a bully just tries to take more and more and more. Absolutely. I don't really know what the right answer is, but I think I see a little bit more evidence on the other side of the question, and I want to raise it. So you can tell me why you disagree. I think this notion of Trump derangement syndrome is real. And I think the idea that because he's such a threat that whenever he says up, other people say down, can actually end up essentially becoming a favor to Trump. So Trump said we must open the schools in the summer of 2020, and many progressives said we must keep the schools closed. Oh my God, I can't believe you're going back to this. In the end, I think that it kind of worked out poorly for progressives. I think immigration is another example. The way he talks about immigration is so horrific and racist, and then the Biden administration had this policy that was so open. I don't think you were paying attention, dude. The most open of any Democratic administration, that it became a huge political weight on the administration, and I would argue was also substantively problematic, although I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't. I mean, deportation, is that the metric? Because they were way up. Obama and Biden were deporting people left and right. It was a real sore point with the organizing community. All right, whatever. Let's see where he's going with this. And then the Biden administration has this policy that he says it was so open. That was just Trump saying, and Republicans being instructed to say the words open border every 5 seconds. Seems to have worked on this guy. So I absolutely take your point that showing weakness can lead a bully to do more, but I sometimes think that Trump's opponents think that they take that too far. Oh, it's always too far for those guys. And they say anything he does, we need to do the opposite. And that has sometimes increased his political appeal because it has put Democrats in a place that a very small percentage of Americans are in. And I don't feel that way, and I don't think he's right. But I don't know. Maybe that goes to what Greg was telling me when Greg was finally explaining the abundance agenda thing to me. Right? Well, there are a number of reasons, and there's a lot of nuance to the ways that Democrats end up positioning themselves vis-a-vis Trump. In just the same way that there's nuance to how Democrats position themselves with or somehow fail to grasp success even when they dominate a state government. And the real reason it's happening is not that they're simply refusing to impose their will, Green Lantern-like, but rather that there's a agenda that people don't really grasp or understand of complete and utter nihilism on the other side, which just presents itself as normal discourse because the newspapers say it's normal discourse. Others disagree, as opposed to others don't even agree that there should be such a thing as policy, even if it's a good one that they agree with. They'd rather burn things to the ground. They don't say that, so people don't come away with that impression. But it's what's happening nonetheless. And here it's, okay, well, I see Democrats just saying I'm automatically going to be in opposition. Well, it's a good starting point because Trump is a very stupid and brutal person, and it's probably wise as a default. If you have to start somewhere, you don't. But if you have to, and someone insists that you start somewhere, I must label you in some way, well, put me down for a no then, and then we'll talk about the nuance. But then you never return to ask me about the nuance, and you just say, you're always an automatic no. No, you asked me to put down a default position, and I thought you were going to report. You're going to come back and consult with me. What are you thinking so I can write about that? But then you never did. You went to a wine and cheese party and just said I had derangement syndrome. Thanks a lot. I won't be talking to you anymore. Oh, now they won't even talk to the press. They're as much against the free press as... No. But at least Masha Gessen gets a chance to say something to you. What is it that he's going to say? Well, first of all, on the facts, I disagree that the Biden administration immigration policies can be characterized as open. Yeah, I think they were hugely problematic, but they were pretty damn restrictive, comparable to the last few administrations. And certainly Trump wants to have more restrictive immigration politics. Not policies, but politics. But I think maybe, and that's an important distinction, by the way, he doesn't say policies. Probably wants to have more restrictive policies too, but what he really wants out of it is politics. But I think maybe it would be useful to tackle it from a different standpoint. I think where I agree with you is that a kind of reflective you say up, we say down is ineffective. It is, but it's not what's happening. It's what you want to say is happening, because then you get to write your column, submit it, and go to the party. But okay, you say up, we say down is ineffective, both because it can be substantively wrong, but also because it offers no alternative theory to voters or to the American public. I think that Trump's ideas, which are for the most part very, very, very bad ideas, are rooted in a sort of articulated worldview. One of the key elements of this worldview is that he has a really horrible view of human nature. He just really thinks that people are awful. People are mean, greedy, out for themselves. I think he probably is like that himself, and I think he thinks everybody is like that. And that's why he's so transactional, and that's why he impugns that kind of motivation to his partners, his interlocutors, and his voters. I think the Democrats would do best by advancing a different theory of humanity. I think that where we have seen effective democratic and anti-autocratic leadership emerge around the world, it's always been based on the idea that people are good, that they care about one another, they like helping one another, which is actually a fact about human nature. And policies can be based on that. And you know what? If you actually thought about opening the schools, and I was writing this at the time, if you thought about opening the schools from that point of view, from the point of view of good humans who are in fundamental need of connection, you would have wanted to open the schools. Is that right? I don't know. I was going to say, if you thought about opening the schools from that point of view, from the point of view of good humans who are in a fundamental need to help one another, you would have said, despite the fact that I would like to get together, despite the fact that I think it might be better for educational outcomes, I want to help not spread this virus. And I'm going to put up with it. I'm going to cope. It's weird and bad, just like it is dealing with war. But just as classes started taking place in bomb shelters, classes are going to start taking place via the internet at home. That's a weird conclusion to see Masha coming around to, if you ask me. Leonhardt then chimes in, just in terms of political history, I think there's something really interesting about that, because I agree with you about Trump's dark view of humanity, me too, and dark view of many things. I mean, he sort of doesn't seem to care about the truth. That's obvious. It's not that he's unwilling to say true things. Who says that? It's just that whether something is true has virtually no bearing on whether he wants to say it. He'll just say it. And political history suggests, to quote David Axelrod, the Obama guru, that's what voters tend to look for, is the remedy, not the replica. So if you think about how we might emerge from the Trump era and what people will go looking for after it, they probably will not go looking for another Trump. History suggests instead that they will be looking for more of an anti-Trump to a Trump. And this is true generally. I mean, Donald Trump is clearly an anti-Barack Obama, and Trump followed him. And Barack Obama, in different ways, is an anti-George W. Bush. And Obama followed Bush. You're describing the problem or the outcome backwards. This is what happened. Was it what drove things? To some extent. I don't know. But, after the fact, well, this one followed that one, so he's the anti-that. George H.W. Bush followed Reagan. Was he an anti-Reagan? No, he was a continuation of Reagan. Well, but sometimes it's the opposite. Okay, good theory. Anyway, and so as Democrats think not about where the puck is today, but where the puck is going to be, to use another phrase, it seems to me that history argues not to try to imitate him, but to think about what Americans don't like about him, even Americans who might have voted for him, and try to give them an alternative story that they might be able to embrace even during Trump's term, but certainly after it. Gessen says, I think that's a great point. I would add to it that Democrats also have to be super worried about whether the puck is going to be anywhere at all. Yes, that's fair, says Leonhardt. That's fair. He says it twice. That actually brings us to really quite nicely to something else I wanted to ask you about, which is I see some tentative reasons for optimism. I'm guessing that while we agree on the facts, you may see less reason for optimism. And so I want to ask you if you can help me avoid being naive, to be frank about it. Oh, boy. I don't know. So you look at the sheer number of federal judges who have ruled against Trump. who've stopped things like his executive orders against law firms, who've said, yes, they've failed to bring back Mr. Abrego Garcia from El Salvador, but they have stopped Trump from sending anyone else there. Have they? They've stopped many of these orders against universities. These orders from judges have come from not only Democratic-appointed judges, but Republican-appointed judges, even some Trump-appointed judges. And then you start to see little signs of people saying, this isn't okay. The Wall Street Journal just ran a story about how law firms that have caved to Trump and signed deals are struggling to hold on to some of their lawyers and have lost some of their business. I look at this and I say, it's not sufficient. It's not enough. We need so much more, but I also see some signs of hope, and I at least want to lift up people who are opposing him. I'm curious how you think about that balance and how we can end up avoiding the nihilism that can be a favor to would-be autocrats, which I don't really believe is happening anyway. I add. Gesson says, I think you're right that we should look at the judiciary both as a source of hope and I think as a source of extreme worry, partly for known structural reasons. If we look at autocracies that have taken hold, destroying the judiciary has always been a key part of establishing autocratic rule, and the judiciary is the hardest thing to restore once it's been destroyed. It's a very, very complicated universe of courts and lawyers and cultural norms and educational institutions and law firms as institutions that are distinct from individual lawyers, and he's attacking every one of those elements. He's actually very smart about his full-on attack on the rule of law as part of the American system, including the provision and the so-called Big Beautiful Bill that would allow the administration essentially to ignore court decisions with impunity. We have to find a way to balance sounding the alarm and conjuring hope. There's a useful distinction in the study of political hope between hope and faith. Faith is when you kind of sit back and think that, well, America's exceptional and everything will work out in the end. And hope is when you observe and participate in the thing that carries out the truth of the theory that it will actually get better. So hope is connected to action, and you can't take action without hope, but you also can't have hope without taking action. So it's a feedback loop. Leonhardt then says, well, Mosh, thanks for helping us think about all these important issues, and thank you for joining me today. He says, thank you. This was a pleasure. And then they both go out for coffee or maybe wine and cheese as far as I know. Okay. Interesting, good stuff, worthy of thinking about, worthy of commenting on along the way, as I did. Now I got to double back, though, and try and offer you some of the things that I said I was going to pull up. First of all, here's the Vietnam veterans thing. I'll just include it in the roundup, but it comes from the New York Times coverage of preparations for the parade. Military parade marches into political maelstrom as Trump deploys troops to L.A. But again, sort of looking at the politics of the whole thing. Did I put that one away? Yes, I did. It's here. Maybe we can share it. But apparently the Vietnam veterans thing comes from there. But I also need to mention that Trump did, in fact, go. Where the hell did he go? I got to read the article to figure it out. Trump says army bases, among other things, says army bases will revert to Confederate names. It really doesn't have anything to do with anything, but it was something that he thought he could throw out as red meat to the troops that he selected to sit behind him. Where was he? Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg, briefly Fort Liberty under the Biden administration. But of course, Donald Trump hates liberty, so he got rid of it. And remember, they tried to pull the trick. Well, we'll find others where the bases were named after Confederate generals. They thought, well, this is interesting, right? This is very insightful, I think, into the Republican and conservative mind, just in general. Why are they conservatives? Well, they like things the way they were. This is Fort Bragg. Why does it need to be called Fort Bragg? And by the way, what's wrong with Fort Liberty? Well, it used to be called Fort Bragg, and I think of it as Fort Bragg. And for a long time, you're going to have to say Fort Liberty, formerly Fort Bragg, just as we did X, formerly Twitter, right? No. I want it back as Fort Bragg. So they went out and they found the name of some soldiers, usually enlisted soldiers, but people of some note, right? They had won the Medal of Honor or something. And they had the same last name, Bragg. So, we'll go back to naming it Fort Bragg, but it won't be Confederate General Fort Bragg. And then Trump said, yes, it will. But, okay, this will describe where he was and what he was doing and why it was wrong to begin with, and then the dumb things that he said while he was there. So Trump now says this is this angle is being covered this way. Army bases will revert to Confederate names. The move would reverse a years-long effort to remove names and symbols honoring the Confederacy from the military because, we should never have done that. I don't know what the thinking was. I guess it was just, sometimes people attribute it to, well, they were, white supremacist, racist people in general, and they believed in the lost cause thing. And, I guess there's another explanation for it, but which is not any better, but maybe the idea of, well, in trying to reunite the country in the decades after the Civil War, part of the reason that it was acceptable in some circles eventually in the North to do things like that as well, we're done embarrassing the South for their participation in the rebellion and insurrection. And we're trying to bring them back into the circle. And we have so much participation in the military from Southern families, and they're just kind of getting used to the idea of entering the U.S. military again. We'll show them that we're not entirely hostile to them by naming these bases in the South, but not always in the South, after Confederate generals to signal that it's okay for Southerners to come back into the military and fill our ranks again. Maybe. Anyway, here's the facts as reported by Chris Cameron for the New York Times. And he has been covering this whole effort at renaming the Army bases for a long time. President Trump, during a speech at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, said on Tuesday that he would restore all the names of Army bases that were named for Confederate generals but were ordered changed by Congress, and that means something, in the waning days of his first administration. Act of Congress. Can he undo it by himself? Probably not. Does he announce he's going to do it anyway? Yes. Do we report on it as if it had happened? Yes. Apparently we will. And I guess also just want to throw out there, really, do you have to be that hidebound? I want it to be Fort Bragg. Why, though? Why? Because it used to be Fort Bragg, and I'm confused now. I understand the confusion, but one, Fort Liberty, not hard to remember. Two, Liberty, that's a good thing. Even Bragg says he was for liberty, even though he was for the wrong kind of liberty. But whatever. But, do you really have to? Well, it used to be called that, so now it has to be called that again. Now, we can never have anything new, ever. Well, it's ultimate conservative. Anyway, his move skirts the law, i.e., ignores/breaks would be another way of putting it. Mandating the removal of Confederate symbols from the military through the same maneuver used to restore the name of Fort Bragg, which was briefly renamed Fort Liberty. In a statement, the Army said it would take immediate action to restore the old names of the bases originally honoring Confederates, but the base names would instead honor other American soldiers, not foreign Confederate soldiers, with similar names and initials. For example, Fort Eisenhower in Georgia honoring President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who led the D-Day landings, in case you've forgotten that guy, during World War II, will now revert to the name Fort Gordon, because everybody knows who Gordon is, right? No? You don't? Isn't that weird? Right, Fort Eisenhower. Why is it named Eisenhower? Well, everybody knows. He was a general, president, it's a big deal. No, it's got to be Fort Gordon. Why? Not because John Brown Gordon is so important and so interesting to people, but because, I don't know, it used to be called Fort Gordon and all the maps say that. Well, the maps used to say Gulf of Mexico too, and they managed to make that happen. So why can't they just say through sheer force of will that we want it to be Fort Eisenhower and Fort Liberty? We just say so. They could, but instead they're lending their power to the Confederacy, which is dumb and treasonous, but they're doing it anyhow. Because why? Why? Masha Gessen and David Leonhardt, you know why? Because they're automatically in opposition to everything that Biden did. It's a derangement syndrome, and people can't be for that, except they are, and he just apparently won the presidency. So why aren't you prescribing for Democrats that same formula that has won the presidency successfully in the most immediate past? Because we're here to attack Democrats, damn it. Don't you see? That's an unusual take, really. Okay, so where were we with the news reporting? Right, Fort Eisenhower is going to go back to Gordon, by the way. Who is John Brown? Who's Gordon? in all of this? Is it the guy from Sesame Street? No, it's John Brown Gordon, the Confederate slave owner and suspected Ku Klux Klan member. Perfect. That's what, we're going to name these things after Confederate generals to show the Southern military families who have the tradition of joining the military that it's okay to fill our ranks again. What are we going to show to the actual majority of our enlisted membership who are black, Latino, brown of some kind, all races, Asian, from anywhere around the world? Ku Klux Klan is our guy. That's, is it going to change things? Are people not going to enlist? No, they're going to ignore the name if they ever cared about it in the first place and take the college money or just the good pay and career advancement. They don't really care what the fort is called, but Donald Trump does because he can't be asked to remember a new name, and it sticks it to the libs. He owns the libs by changing the names back, particularly if at first they try to say, well, it's not for John Brown Gordon, it's for Gordon from Sesame Street, somebody totally different, you see? And then, of course, then Trump can't handle that nuance of it and just blurts out, no, it's the Klan guy. Anyway, this time around, the Army said it would name the base in honor of Master Sergeant Gary Gordon, who fought in the Battle of Mogadishu in Somalia. Okay. Mr. Trump, however, contradicted that explanation in his announcement, at one point saying that the Army would be, quote, restoring the name of one Army base in Virginia, Fort Greg Adams, Greg-Adams. That's going back to what? Fort Robert E. Lee. Previously named, of course, for the commander of the Confederate Army. So there's no, we found another guy named Robert E. Lee. And you probably could, by the way. But no, he just says, yep, this is it. And the Army has said in its statement that the base would be named in honor of Private Fitz Lee, a member of the all-black Buffalo Soldiers who was awarded a Medal of Honor after serving in the Spanish-American War. Trump says, no, it's Robert E. Lee. Trump made the announcement as he took a victory lap for renaming the Army installation at Fort Bragg, which had been originally named for Braxton Bragg, the Confederate general. Fort Bragg was renamed Fort Liberty after Congress moved to strip the base of its Confederate name in 2020, because we won and they lost, mandating a new one. Can you believe they changed that name in the last administration for a little bit? Trump asked. Yeah, we were there. We know. As soldiers in the crowd loudly booed. Fort Bragg is in. That's the name. And Fort Bragg it shall always remain. That's never going to be happening again. But Congress could say, F the effing F's out of you. We're going to do it. But he'll cry in his oatmeal. Anyway, delivering a campaign-style speech, and that's a problem. Surrounded by hundreds of Army troops, Mr. Trump sought to turn the page on what was an embarrassing political defeat late in his first term. It isn't his term, after all. An overwhelming majority of Congress, Democrats and Republicans alike, overrode his veto amid the fallout of protests after the murder of George Floyd. To pass a bill that included the provision to rename the 9 Army bases honoring Confederate generals. Those bases were ultimately renamed for people who embody the best of the United States Army, according to the naming commission that recommended the initial changes. They included decorated officers, enlisted troops who survived harrowing trials in battle, and one civilian, Dr. Mary Edwards Walker, a Civil War surgeon and the only woman ever awarded a Medal of Honor. One of the officers, Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams Early, was honored by Congress earlier this year, with Speaker Mike Johnson presenting an award for the 6888, the only all-black, all-female Army battalion to serve in Europe during World War II, to her descendants. If Mr. Trump's effort to rename the bases is successful, and what is this, the 400th paragraph? If it's successful, the whole thing has been premised on, I'm ordering them to do it, and I'm the commander-in-chief, so it's done, and it's never going to be otherwise ever again. The headline says he did it. The 400th paragraph says maybe, and if it's successful, all the names will be struck, the new ones, that is. The original naming of the 9 Army bases, apparently I can't say that, was part of a movement to glorify the Confederacy and advance the lost cause myth that the Civil War was fought over states' rights and not slavery. Mr. Trump and other conservatives had raged against the name changes, which were finalized under the Biden administration, arguing that wokeness was softening the military and wiping away important elements of American tradition and heritage. Although, again, did the soldiers give a flying anything at all whatsoever about what the name of the base is? As long as it's not, base, we're going to lose the war, then what's the problem? They don't care. Mr. Trump, who has repeatedly defended monuments honoring Confederates, vowed during the 2024 campaign to revert to the name of Fort Bragg to honor Braxton Bragg, who was widely considered by his fellow Confederates and many historians to have been a poor commander, by the way. Mr. Trump's pledge was brought to fruition in March, sort of maybe, but with a twist that seemed both a rewriting of history and an internet troll, rather. Fort Liberty again became Fort Bragg, but not in honor of the Confederate general, but in memory of Private Roland L. Bragg, a previously obscure infantryman who had served at Fort Bragg and fought in the Battle of the Bulge during World War II. Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, announced a similar name change shortly after that appeared, intended to sidestep the law banning the honoring of Confederates. Fort Moore, renamed in 2023 for Lieutenant General Harold G. Moore and his wife Julia, would be called Fort Benning. Instead of honoring Henry L. Benning, a Confederate and white supremacist, the base would be named for Corporal Fred G. Benning, who served during World War I. Yeah, I don't know how convincing that was to anyone. Another name change by the Army on Tuesday appeared particularly tortured to fit the old name while still ostensibly honoring a different soldier. Fort Walker, named for Civil War surgeon, would be renamed again to Fort A.P. Hill. That base was originally named to honor Ambrose Powell Hill, a Confederate officer who was killed late in the war. The Army said on Tuesday that the base would be renamed Fort Anderson Pin Hill to honor Lieutenant Colonel Edward Hill, First Sergeant Robert A. Pin, oh my goodness, I'm very late here, and Private Bruce Anderson, who fought for the United States during the Civil War. Oh, thank you for at least getting the right side of the Civil War on that one. So they found an A and a P and a hill. Not one single AP hill, but okay. They're really going out of their way. And I'd like to take that one. I wish I was able to inject that one into the Masha Gessen, David Leonhardt conversation here. Is this not derangement? I mean, how far are these guys going out of their way to come up with an A and a P and a hill so they can name it AP Hill and still say, no, I didn't name it after, and then to have a big speech in which he says, I spilled the beans, I did do it. That's exactly what it means. We're even going to have a Fort Robert E. Lee. This is somebody who really does deserve to be reflexively opposed in everything, because you're going to be right 100% of the time, even if the reason for your being right needs some work. Okay, I would just suggest that maybe they think about that one instead. All right, we didn't get to some of the other things that I had in store, but what can you do? All of this will be surpassed in the days to come. Anyway, tomorrow, Friday, etc. I think I may actually have 5 pre-recorded shows to offer you. I just have to hammer them into shape. I hope they still feel relevant. I hope they don't seem like relics of the free days when they get played.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, Justice Putnam comes next with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and hopefully he'll keep you current while I'm away. I know he's right on top of the D.C. bar election. That's right in his roundup right up at the top. Also, a Wisconsin lawsuit seeks to ban Elon Musk from ever again offering $1 million checks to their voters for their votes. Wise move. Good prep. See you next week.